This is a Geek Leader. Hey guys, it's John Rauda, and I'm back today with episode 26 of A Geek Leader, and I want to talk about communication for geeks. Communication for anybody in IT or technology or really in any industry that needs help communicating. And what I've found throughout the years of being an IT manager and working in technology is that a lot of people that are really good in technology are really bad at communication. And I must say that I am one of those in many cases. I do a pretty poor job from time to time at communicating the right things to the right people at the right time. So what I want to do today is give you guys some pointers and some tips and some things that I've done throughout the years to improve my communication and some ways that I can hopefully share that with you and make you guys better communicators. And if you know someone that's a terrible communicator, maybe this would be a good episode to share with them and let them start listening to the podcast as well. So kicking things off, I want to say that one of the reasons that I think people in technology are poor communicators is because we have this fear of not knowing. We have this fear that we don't want people to know that we don't know something. And one of my favorite quotes that's in a technology book is in Notes to a Software Team Lead. And in that book, the author says, "There are no experts, there's only us." And that's so true. In a lot of tech fields, things are brand new. Things are still emerging, and it's hard to find people that are truly experts in the field. And we are always afraid that people are going to find out that we aren't that expert. So we don't want to communicate sometimes because we don't want to show people how little we actually know. But I found that when you do communicate and you do let people know that you're not aware of this certain situation, but you're willing to learn, that they open up and they say, "I really don't know either." And then you talk about it and you figure things out together. And that's how innovation starts. That's how new things are created. People are innovative by sharing those ideas and working together. Now, there's some bad things that can happen when you don't communicate well. And some of that leads into being unproductive or even worse, counterproductive, where people do the wrong thing and go backwards in things. So if you are afraid of communicating, you can do what I do to help myself whenever I run into that kind of fear, and that's to play it all out. Play out the worst case scenario. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to go ahead and tell it again. When I first started to teach college, the first time, someone came up to me and said, "Hey, you would be a great teacher. Would you like to teach this course?" And that was after I spoke in a classroom setting. And I said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And then like the next day, I was like, what the heck did I do? Why did I sign up to teach that? And I started thinking about all these things that might actually happen. So in my brain, I was going through the scenario, and at the time I was a database administrator, and I was going to be teaching this Introduction to Computers, Computer Science 101 course. And in the back of my mind, I was thinking, you know what's going to happen is I'm going to get out there. For starters, my fly is going to be down, and you leave your zipper down, and that's always that fear that when you're public speaking. So I had that fear. And then I also thought, I'm going to say something stupid, or someone's going to ask me a question, and I'm not going to know the answer to it. And there's going to be a reporter in there who's going to write this article about how terrible of a professor I am. My boss is going to see it, and they're going to fire me because they're going to think I'm a fraud, that I don't know what I'm doing, and all these scenarios went through my head. So what I do is I try to play out the worst of the worst case scenario. Just play it out, see what will actually happen. All right, and then figure out what is the likelihood of that actually happening. Well, it's not likely that I'm going to leave my fly down. This almost never happens, and I can always check that before I go in there. So not likely that's going to happen. Number two, it's not likely that there's going to be a reporter taking a Computer Science 101 class. But it's possible. So it's not likely that's going to happen. And then if I do say something stupid, now that's pretty likely. But I think people are more forgiving. And there's a way that I can mitigate that. If it's not something I'm 100% sure on, why don't I just say, "I don't know," and I'll get back to you. So that's what I did. So the first day of class, I go there, double check, made sure the zipper was up, got in class, surveyed the class. I had everyone go around and introduce themselves and say what they did. And what do you know? No one said that they were a reporter. So I was like, all right, got the first two checked off. And then it happened. Someone asked a question, and I didn't know the answer to it. It was about some kind of new technology that just came out, and I wasn't sure compatibility and all that good stuff. So I just said, I don't know, but I'll look it up and get back to you. And that's it. That was it. There was nothing to be afraid of. There was no fear. There was no reason to be concerned. And that's the same thing that happens when we're communicating to people. It's a lot of times we're afraid of how they're going to respond. And we're worried about what they'll think of us. And when you think about it, you're not going to be as worried about what other people are going to think of you if you realize that they're probably not even thinking about you at all. Or if you realize how little they actually thought about you, how little time they actually put into thinking about you. It's not that much. I mean, look at yourself. Are you really contemplating the entire day over what someone misspoke in a meeting, or someone said something wrong, or someone stuttered a little bit, or mispronounced a word? No, it's a fleeting moment. You may think about it for just that little bit. It's the 5 seconds that goes through your brain, and then you forget about it and you move on. And the same thing's going to happen to you. So don't be afraid to communicate things. Don't be afraid to ask questions. All right, so don't worry about that. Now, there's different types of communication. When you're communicating in person versus communicating over the phone, or communicating in written form like email or over Slack or Instant Messenger or something like that. And I want to talk about some things about each one of those, but not in too detail. I don't want to overdo it, because there are some particulars about each medium that you're communicating with, but there's an overall aspect of communication that's even far more important. So there's this rule called the 738-55 rule, and I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but some researchers did this analysis, and they try to figure out like how much of your communication is actually important, and where does that come from. And what they said is the words that actually come out of your mouth, the verbal words, this is when you're doing face-to-face communication, that's going to equate for 7% of the message that's received. So 7% of the message that's received are the actual words that come out of your mouth. And this poses a problem to technical people, because a lot of us techies out there, we like to take things literally, and we like to focus on the exact words that came out of someone's mouth. And the problem with that is only 7% of our communication comes out of that. So we are 93% in the dark at that point. Let me give you an example. Let's say I have this guy that works for me named Rick, and I say, "Hey, Rick, you're a good Java developer." Now, the exact words are, "You are a good Java developer." But how I say those are going to make a big difference. What if I say, "Rick, you're a good Java developer"? Or if I say, "Rick, you're a good Java developer"? Or if I say, "Rick, you're a good Java developer"? I mean, all those different things have a different meaning. They have a different way. And that's where we come into what's called vocal tonality, or the tone of your voice. And that makes up 38% of the message that's being conveyed. So the tone of your voice, the emphasis that you put on different parts of the sentence or the words that you're saying, whether your pitch is going up at the end or down at the end, are going to determine how people receive that message and what comes out, what the outcome is. And that's going to be 38% of the message that's received, is the tone of your voice. And I think you've all done that. And that's one of the things that we struggle with emails, is that we can't tell the tone of the voice of the person that's written in the email. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But the last part of that 738-55 rule, the 55, is your body language. How are you sitting in a room? How are you standing when you're talking to someone? Are your shoulders slouched? Are your arms crossed? Are your feet up on the desk? What's your body language? That's going to determine, the communication. If you're upright and you look really tense because your muscles are all tight, that's going to affect the way that someone perceives what the words that you actually say. They're going to say, "This person's tense." So it's going to be a more serious tone. If you're sitting back with your feet propped up on a desk and you're saying the exact same thing, you're going to be more relaxed. It's going to have a relaxed tone, and people are going to perceive that as a relaxed message, and they're not going to be as urgent on how they work on it. So that's a big part of it as well. I don't necessarily believe that it's always 738-55. I think situational awareness is going to have to be in play in that, and realize that the situation that you're in is also going to determine the message that's received, and not just the hard rule of 738-55, which is another problem us techies get into. Let's switch gears just a little bit, and let's talk about email. So as I was saying, that if only 7% of the words that we say makes a message, but email, there is no vocal tonality. It's hard to understand tone in email. So I had someone that I worked with for a few years, and they were a great guy. It was great to work with, humorous, funny to talk to, but his emails, oh my gosh. When he wrote an email, it sounded like he was the biggest jerk. And part of that is because when people read the email, they read it in their own tone or their own voice of the situation that they're in at that time. So a lot of times when I was reading emails, I batch a lot of my emails. I don't read them as they come in. I'll read them, several at a time. I'll be reading 5 or 6 emails, and then I get to his. I'm kind of tired of reading emails at this point. I'm not in a great mood, and then I read it, and I don't say it with a laugh. I don't say it with a smile. I don't say it as being kind of sarcastic and funny. I say it as, man, this guy's a jerk. And that's the way the voice in my head reads it. That's the vocal tonality that's coming out when I'm reading that message. So when you write an email, write it in a way that it's not going to change the meaning too much, whether they're smiling when they read it or whether they're angry when they read it. Now, another part of communication is receiving the message, right? Not just sending the message. So when you get an email from someone, and I'm sure we've all done this, where we've got an email and we're like, oh my God, I can't believe that person said that to me. And they get all mad and they get all angry, but it was a joke. You just couldn't tell because it was the way it was written in the email. So in all your emails, one of the things that I try to do, and I fail at this quite a bit, but I try to smile when I read the email. And I actually make a mental note to smile before I read this so that I don't get angry and I don't get mad and I don't get upset about it. So I smile when I read my email. And I think you guys should do the same thing. So another thing that you can do to help improve your email skills is keep emails short. So being in leadership, I get a lot of emails. A lot of emails. And one of the things that I try to do with my team and the people that work for me is I have this rule that your email shouldn't be more than 4 sentences. I call it my rule of 4. There shouldn't be more than 4 sentences. And the reason why I say that is because after about the 4th sentence, I'm done reading your email. If you haven't made your point, if you haven't really drawled me into the email after 4 sentences, I'm probably going to skim or not read at all the rest of the message. So you got to keep your email short, to the point, and concise. Anybody out there that teaches business writing and they're teaching you to be very thorough and write lots of details in your emails, don't understand how business actually works. People don't want to read lots and lots of detail within your emails. They want to get to the point because email is overwhelming. It really is. We get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day, and to read every word and be happy about reading every word just frustrates you. When I get a really short email that's to the point, concise, it makes me feel good. It makes me respond to that email in a much better way than if it's a really, really long email that doesn't really get to the point. It's got a lot of fluff in it. I don't like that at all. Another thing you can do when you're working with emails is understand the concept of the reader reading the email. So if the email goes back and forth, like you send a message, they reply with something, and you have to ask them another question, and they reply with a question because they didn't quite understand you. I have this thing, I call it as part of the same rule of 4, is that if the emails go back and forth 4 times, 2 from me, 2 from the sender, we're not getting anywhere on email. We need to stop the emails and have a conversation, either on the phone, either through instant messenger, or get up, walk over there, and talk to them. All right, it works better that way because when you're talking to them face to face or even on the phone, you at least get the vocal tonality. You can help understand the question. And if you're face to face, you get the body language as well. So it helps out a lot. And another thing about email, if there's ever a question that invokes an emotional response, that should never happen over email. If at all costs, you should try to avoid any kind of emotional answer over email. For example, if someone sends you something and they want to know, like artwork or a paper that they wrote, and they want to know what you think of it, you probably shouldn't reply and say, it's okay, over email. Or even if you say, oh, it's good, they'll think, oh, it's just good, it's not great. There's this emotional thing that if you talk to them in person, say, pick up the phone and say, hey, I got your email, I was reading this, and it's fantastic, but I would change this and this. They can get the vocal tonality, they can understand the emotions behind it, and it makes more sense, and it makes them feel better. You should never respond emotionally over email. Also, if you get an email that angers you and you want to type a quick message out, don't send it. It's okay to type the message, but don't send it. I don't even do it in my email program because I don't want to accidentally send out those kind of emotional messages. All right, some other things and tips about communication that you can do. One is, I call it the same day summary, and that's the idea of whenever you have a meeting or any type of correspondence to where a decision is made, and that may be just in passing, you talk to someone, you say, yes, I'm going to do that, or no, I'm not going to do that, or hey, can you handle this for me? It's really good to follow up with a really short same day summary, and by short, I mean really short. So you can just say, hey, just wanted to follow up on what we talked about in the hall yesterday, that you would complete X, Y, and Z by this date. Thanks. If anything's wrong, let me know, or something like that. Something to that effect. Very short summary of what just happened, what the deliverables are, who's going to be responsible for what, and when. Same thing can happen in meetings. It's a great way to sum up and wrap up meetings. It usually takes you literally 2 to 3 minutes at most to write up one for a meeting. And I think that's really important to do. All right, another tip when it comes to communication is batching your processes. We talk about that in computer science a lot, that you write a program that batches a lot of activities together and processes together and happens all at once to save computer times from starting and stopping activities and so on and so forth. But the same is true when it comes to communication. There's this idea, and I'm not sure the exact numbers, but people say that there's a cost to interrupting people. And a lot of times they say that the task switching cost could be up to 5 minutes. So if I'm working on a particular program and I'm typing this code out there and someone comes and interrupts me and asks me a question and we talk for 3 or 4 minutes, it may take me up to 5 minutes to get back to what I was doing and figure out where I was and get that train of thought going again. And I've even had it happen sometimes where I had this brilliant idea that's probably going to make me like $1 million, and someone interrupted me with a question or a response or something like that, and I answered that communication, and then I went back and I totally forgot the idea and I lost it. And I'm sure we've all done that. We've all lost millions and millions of dollars through ideas that were gone that we never could execute upon because of distractions. So how do you eliminate that? How do you reduce distractions? You can do that by batching your request. So let me tell you a story. I had this guy that worked for me a while back, and I used to always interrupt him with questions all throughout the day. Anytime my boss came to me and asked me for a report or asked me for information on something or how something's going, I would almost immediately send him an IM and ask him the exact same question and interrupt him and so on and so forth. And then during one of our one-on-one sessions, he mentioned that he feels like he gets interrupted a lot. And I said, by me? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh. So then I went back and checked my IM logs, and sure enough, I interrupted him like 8 or 9 times a day. Well, that's ridiculous, because let's just say it was 8 times a day and there's a call switching there. That's like 40 minutes of his day that's gone that I wasted just for switching tasks, not alone, just for his response to me. And if you count that from my day, that's 40 minutes from my day of interrupting him. So what I do now is I just keep log of those tasks, of all those questions or things that I was going to interrupt him with, and maybe once or twice a day, I'll say, hey, whenever you get a chance, can you respond to this, and this? All right? And those are the things that I need you to respond to. And he gets back to me. So what that does is it prevents him from, multiple times a day getting that distraction, getting that task switching cost from having to switch from one task to the other. He can do it all at once, switch back, and we're good to go. So batching your request is a really easy way to help improve communication skills. Now, sometimes when you're communicating with someone, you have to have a difficult conversation out. And I don't want to go through all the steps of having a difficult conversation. You can go back and listen to episode 4 called Having a Difficult Conversation, where I kind of explain some of the ways that you can get through an awkward or difficult conversation with someone. But in short, basically, it's just the idea that you got to be, direct and to the point. You've got to be authentic in yourself. Rip the Band-Aid off. Don't just take time, kind of slowly going through it. Just directly to the point. Rip the Band-Aid off. Let them know what you're doing. And last, be unapologetic about this difficult conversation. Don't apologize that you have to have the conversation. Be grateful that you're having the conversation, and let them know that it's a good thing to have this conversation and get it out in the open. And another thing about communication, the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. Okay? And that's with any communication. That's with public speaking. That's with emails. That's with writing. The more you do it, the better you'll get at it. That's one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because I want to get better at speaking. And if you go back and listen to episode 0 or 1, which I do not recommend because they're terrible, you'll realize that I've gotten a lot better, and I feel like I'm continually getting better, and I hope that goes on and on and on. And the same thing happens with public speaking. The more you speak, the better you'll get. The more you have conversations with your team, the easier they will be. So that's my podcast about communication for geeks, or communicating with geeks, whichever you want to call it. But it's just about being real, being short, being to the point, and understanding that vocal tonality and body language play a big, big role in how people receive your message. It's not just the words that you say or the words that you type, but it's the situation that they're in, the tone that they come across, and the body language of not only you, but the person receiving it. Okay? So that's it with communications. I would love it if you guys could go over to iTunes, leave me a rating or review. Hit me up on Twitter @JohnRauda and send me a message. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions about leadership, and also visit geekleader.com to get all the show notes, blogs, articles, some things that aren't on the podcast. You can find it all right there and sign up for my newsletter. All right, thanks a lot.